Hi, welcome to Vegetables, day 46. So today, I don't know what to think about today. Um, I did watch the Truth About Weight Loss Summit, and I did make a few notes, but for some reason, I just really wasn't interested in what the speakers had to say. And I can go over that in just a few minutes. But as far as my weight, it's just a little confusing. I think I might need a new scale because I think something to do with the battery, the battery back not staying on and might not be holding the batteries correctly or something. Has something to do with the way it's weighing. I don't know. And I say that because I didn't weigh myself today until 1:30 this afternoon. And at that time, I was 240.3. And I was like, yay! But then I just weighed myself. And it's just now 9 p.m. And I was 246.6. And I'm like, how could I have gained 6 pounds in 7.5 hours? I had to do some subtraction there. 7.5 hours and I gained 6 pounds. So there has to be something wrong. One of the two had to be wrong because my change in clothing, I did have different clothing on. My change in clothing and having eaten twice since then couldn't be a 6-pound difference. It just can't be. It just doesn't make sense. My guess is that the one that was 240 wasn't measuring correctly. So I think I'm going to try to get a new scale. As far as I am eating, it wasn't a good day for eating. Even though I'm watching the Weight Loss Summit and I know that I have to stop eating this way. It was not a good day. For breakfast, I had a bacon, egg white, and cheese sandwich. It was whole wheat bread. But still, 3 pieces of bacon, 2 pieces of toast, a piece of, well, they call it cheese, but it's actually processed cheese food. And egg whites with butter. No, I mean, it was just not a good thing. And then, of course, I had my coffee as usual. For lunch, it was actually okay. It wasn't bad at all. I had a can of chunky chicken noodle soup, no crackers. And with that, I had the same size bowl of American salad blend with a tiny bit of cheese. By tiny bit, it was probably 1/8 of a cup. And then probably no more than a tablespoon of dressing. It was part the orange miso dressing that I have and ranch. But then it got really bad. Scott still had some of his Valentine's candy left over. So to help him get rid of it, that's my justification. I had 4 pieces. 4. I'm not going to be feeling well here in a few minutes. But then I also had a Luna bar. And then my grandson, while I was cooking dinner, I made him some frozen hamburger sliders. Hamburger sliders. There were 6 in the package. He ate 2. Scott had 2.5. I had 1.5. And I should have stopped eating there. But no, I made stew. It was delicious, by the way. But I had a big bowl of stew with 2 refrigerated biscuits. So as you can see, it was quite a bit of food. I mean, at least there was carrots in the chicken noodle soup, and I had the salad for vegetables, and then there was carrots, onions, and potatoes in the stew. So, I mean, at least I got some vegetables in. I just, but it was just not healthy at all. Not healthy at all. But I dropped my notebook. Just as a little bit of joke. I changed my middle name to Dropsy because I drop everything. So let me go get that. Okay. So with today's summit, one of the speakers was Dr. Celeste Bowman, and she was a pediatrician, so she was talking mostly on childhood obesity. So since I don't have any children, I really didn't have any interest in it. I mean, I have my grandson, but he's not, excuse me. He's old enough now that there's no change in his mind or what he eats. But the first guest was Dr. Frank Sabatino, and his presentation was on how hormones affect weight. And he talked a lot about cortisol and how elevated sugar in your blood is a chemical stress, and so when your body's under stress, it releases from the adrenal glands cortisol. And let's see. And then, with the amount of stress that we have these days, our bodies are in a chronic stage of stress. One of the stresses that he took a lot of time covering was sleep deprivation. And so sleep deprivation, as well as lack of physical activity, all add to stress. And what the cortisol does is it puts us into a fight or flight state. And so then what ends up happening is the body takes energy away from all other parts to make sure that there's enough energy in our muscles to be able to fight or flight. To fight or run. And then, when we're in this chronic state of stress, the adrenal glands start to become fatigued. So then the thyroid gland kicks in. And both the adrenal gland and thyroid gland help with not only energy production, but also weight control. And then the sleep deficit is has factors or is a factor in cravings and weight gain. And then he talked about there's a hormone in our stomach that really gets released that tells us that we're hungry, and so it stimulates our appetite. But then our body's supposed to release, when we get full, it's supposed to release leptin, and that's supposed to send the signal to the brain to say, hey, we're full, let's stop eating. But the chronic stress and sleep deprivation cause leptin resistance, so then the brain ignores the leptin and we just keep on eating. And then he did also talk a little bit about caffeine, and how, it increases stress, and again how the stress increases the cortisol, which just increases our insulin resistance, and it keeps us in that chronic state of stress. But the thing he said about caffeine that I thought was the absolute most interesting is he's run several health spas in Florida, and his current one, helps people switch to a low-fat vegan diet and to get off of their legal drugs, I guess you could say, like caffeine. But he did say that caffeine needs to be treated as a mood-altering drug, and that he has had people have an easier time coming off of cocaine than caffeine. And that kind of was like, wow. And then it got me to thinking, I have my cup of coffee every day. I think it's about time that I try to stop that. So the next speaker was Dr. Jamie Kane. And he basically just talked about, what causes obesity. And what some of the diseases of the obesity are. He said that the statistic of people who are obese is nearing 70% of the population, at least the U.S. population. But there are other factors that aren't other people that should be included in that number that aren't, so it is more like 73%. He said that some of the reasons that obesity have increased is partially due to genetics. There are some people who have a true disease that causes someone to overeat and to not process things correctly because they're born that way. But he said the environment and lifestyle are the two most influential aspects that cause obesity. And with our current lifestyle, we are eating 20% more calories than we were in the 1970s. And if you remember from a couple days ago, I mentioned that high fructose corn syrup was introduced in the 1980s. So, that has something to do with it. He also said, as far as the jobs, another thing that's happened, which we all know, is that jobs have become more sedentary, and there's fewer manual jobs and a lot more sit-down desk jobs. And that was perpetuated by the introduction of computers and robots. So, you think about in the 70s when somebody was building a car. There was people there were workers all and up and down the production line assembling the car. Well, now they have robotics that do it, and then instead of having 5 people on the line assembling this car, they have one robot and one employee. Or, the way things are set up. I've not been in a facility, but I could imagine and don't see any reason why there wouldn't be several robots that one person's controlling. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And then, as far as diseases of obesity, he said, of course, the two most common are diabetes and metabolic syndrome, which is essentially another name for insulin resistance. Cardiac problems, like coronary artery disease, heart attacks, cardiomyopathy, arrhythmias, all that stuff. Arthritis and joint disease, but then cancer. He said that the reason that a poor diet causes cancer is because it keeps your body in a high inflammatory state. And that high inflammation is what causes the cells to become overactive. And that also includes not only like your blood cells or your organ cells, it includes your immune system. Which I guess kind of makes sense as far as, we can't figure out where or what the source of my leukemia is. So, but they do know that it has something to do with the B cells, which are part of the immune system. So it wouldn't be surprised to me if the reason that I got leukemia was because of my poor diet. And AJ did ask him about how being overweight affects a person's ability to fight off COVID. And the only thing he really attributed it to was because when you have extra weight, especially the belly weight, it puts extra pressure on your lungs, and so it has a harder time, you have a harder time breathing because there's just not enough room for your lungs to expand once COVID creates a high, the cytochrome, I can't remember the word. I think it's cytokine storm. And then also, it's because as your BMI goes up, your body actually it ages your body. You have an older body, so that is another factor in what helps or prevents you from, or makes it harder for you to fight off any infection, especially COVID. And then they talked about the standard of care for obesity, and the current standard care are amphetamines and shakes. So, like a lot of stuff you see on the infomercials. Medication, but that is dependent upon your insurance coverage. Many insurance companies don't cover weight loss drugs or weight control drugs or appetite suppressants. And then surgery. While academia agrees lifestyle is a factor in any care, instead of, teaching people to change their lifestyle, they just rely on the medication and surgery. And, if you start the medication, you're on that for life. And, I've noticed that too, that in the past, even though I didn't have diabetes, I had a doctor, an endocrinologist, put me on metformin. And I lost weight. But then I got to thinking, if I don't have diabetes, and he tried to say it was because I had insulin resistance. But, but I'm like, well, if I don't have diabetes, why am I taking a diabetes drug? And he's not the only doctor that tried to put me on this metformin. And I didn't like the way that it made me feel. And I wasn't diabetic. And so I'm like, if I don't have diabetes, I'm not going to take a diabetes drug. And at that time, I didn't know anything about insulin resistance. And there wasn't a lot of information out about it. Now, of course, I've done a lot more research since then. And I don't even feel I have insulin resistance because, my blood sugars are always within normal range. I mean, sure, they might get elevated above 100 after eating, but as far as the doctors are concerned, that's fine. That's pretty normal as long as it doesn't go, above like 130, and it never has. The highest I've ever seen is 121, and it always goes right back down. So, I don't believe I have insulin resistance. I might. That's why I'm so fat. But, no, I'm not going to do it with a drug. And, and then when I did stop taking the metformin, all of the weight I'd lost came back on. So, I don't feel that relying on a drug is a permanent solution. Which is another reason why I really need to try and start. I really need to make changes with my diet because I'm on so many medications right now. And I just need to get off of them. But right now, they are helping me. If I were to stop taking them, then all of the conditions that I take them for will quickly return. So I need to make the changes so that I can stop the medications. And hopefully I'll get there, but hopefully maybe by the end of the year, maybe? I don't know, we'll see. And then he did make an analogy, and this is the last thing I really wrote down. He was talking about people with obesity, how it's actually very demoralizing to call somebody obese, that it's better to call them a person with obesity. And his analogy was that because when someone has cancer, they don't call them cancer, they call them a person with cancer. So it just, I don't know, by calling someone obese, there's unfortunately this stigma that they're obese because they're lazy, that they're not, especially on jobs, they feel that an obese person's not worth their time, that they're not going to do a good job because they're lazy, that they don't care about themselves. And then also the stigma with being obese is that people think that they did it to themselves because they just couldn't stop eating. And he pointed out that doctors are actually the worst offenders. And then the next presenter that I listened to was Dr. John Mcdougall. And the only note I wrote for him was that he mentioned the body's fat requirement is only 0.05% of your daily calories. Very little. But he, mostly reiterated what all the other presenters talked about with insulin resistance and how the body stores fat and how Insulin's supposed to open the door to the cells for sugar, but because the cells get full of fat, insulin can't open the door to let the insulin in. And then he, of course, promoted his starch diet where, he says, nobody who eats the way that I recommend in my book gains weight. There is not one person that has followed my diet and stuck to it that is fat. And, I might try it. I might not. I don't know. I know Scott's a little hesitant because, he has diabetes, which, it was discussed by one of the two other doctors. I think Dr. Sabatino. No, it was Jimmy Kane. He said that the starch diet, when you first switch to a plant-based diet, that you do need to be careful how much of the starchy vegetables you eat. And when you do eat them, make sure you pair them with a lot of non-starchy vegetables, because diabetics will see that large spike in the blood sugar. But it does, as your body gets rid of the fat, you do begin seeing the more starchy vegetables have less of an effect on your blood sugar than before. That's about all Dr. Dougal talked about. And, if you want to hear what Dr. Dougal has to say, Dr. Mcdougall has to say, there's all kinds of interviews on YouTube that he's and presentations that he has given, and his message is always the same. So, you might want to search for Dr. Mcdougall and, watch some of them. Watch some of the interviews. Well, that's it for today. Oh, I'm sorry, I did forget. The last presentation was Cyrus Kambata and his wife, and they made a salad and a pressure cooked sweet potato with homemade hummus and steamed veggies. And, they talk about how they eat everything out of a bowl, because the sheer volume of food that they eat, because you could do that with vegetables, it doesn't fit on a plate. But what AJ found very interesting about the salad was that he says he always adds some kind of fruit to his salad. And when you add the fruit and then like a tomato, because when you add the two of them, they create so much juice that you really don't need a dressing. If they do make a dressing, it's usually like some type of flavored balsamic vinegar with some Dijon mustard. And then in addition to the fruit, he added kale and shredded carrots. And the kale, he massaged it for like 2 minutes because it starts to break down the cell walls. So it's easier to chew, easier to digest. And it too creates some additional liquid in the bowl. And so, when he got done making and then he always put some kind of spices. Today he put crushed red pepper, cumin, and curry powder. But he always puts like at least 3 spices on his salad. And, usually when you do that, you don't need a dressing. Well, that is truly it for today. If you're enjoying these little reviews and my daily vlog on, what I'm eating and weighing every day, let me know. And give me a comment. Also, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know when I upload a video every day. And in the meantime, you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.